Alan Shavitz, Webmaster from Marin Coalition. Before we get started on this program, I'd like to go over a few items. This is a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. If you're not familiar with the webinar format, it's basically as if you are an audience in an auditorium. Your video and audio are not on. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at any time during this program by using the Q&A icon on your screen. Just click on that icon, enter your question, and it will be dealt with during the Q&A period of this session. You also have the option to turn on or off closed captioning if you have a need for it. There's the icon at the bottom of your screen marked CC. I should point out these two features may not be available to you if you're on a small screen, such as an iPad or SmartPad or smartphone. This program is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Marin Coalition website within a day or two of the end of this program. And now, without further ado, I present to you your host, Scott Pinsky.
Greetings and good afternoon, everyone. I am Scott Pinsky, the chair of the Marin Coalition, and I'd like to welcome you to our final program for 2022, featuring Supervisor Stephanie Moulton-Peters. Before we begin, I want to start by thanking all of you who have joined us for programs over the last year. We've had a series that has featured quite a number of different subjects: housing and planning issues, education system, upcoming elections, the judicial system, reauthorization of Measure A, and an update on the SMART program. If you live in Marin, we hope that you have been able to learn quite a bit through these programs and about what's happening in our region and our state. And in case you missed any of our events, they are available in recorded form on the archive page of our website at marincoalition.org. Before we begin, let me just say a brief word of thanks to our board of directors: Kevin Haggerty, our program lead; Alan Shavitz, our magical webmaster; Leonard Hoffman, our new treasurer; and directors Nadine Muller, David Gabriel, and Patricia Randolph, all of whom do terrific work for the organization. We all serve as volunteers, and while people say it takes a village, I have to admit to you it takes funding as well. So here's the commercial. While we're still a small organization, we do have expenses that we must meet to stay in operations, and I encourage you to put Marin Coalition on your Santa's list if you've not already taken an opportunity to donate. As you may know, we streamlined our operations in the last year. We're no longer a membership group with annual dues. So you don't get those emails anymore, but accordingly, we now rely on our community support to keep going, and so we hope you'll consider backing us with your tax-deductible financial support. Before we take off on this program, our next event will be in February, not in January. We have not determined our program yet or the date, so we'll let you know that as soon as possible. And then just as far as our in-person programs, by way of an update, we continue to be reviewing the situation as far as the safety and feasibility of in-person programs. We're going to get back to those as soon as we can. We're all ready to get back in one room together. We all miss that. And so we'd like to make that happen as soon as possible. We'll keep you posted on what the board decides as far as a date to resume those programs at McGinnis. So without further ado, thank you for your patience. Let me introduce our speaker. We have, I think for the first time, Stephanie Moulton-Peters. She is the Marin County Supervisor for District 3, which includes Belvedere, Mill Valley, Sausalito, Tiburon, and unincorporated areas of Marin County. In addition to being on the Board of Supervisors, she chairs the Transportation Authority of Marin, the Marin Transit District, and Baywave, Marin's Sea Level Rise Collaborative. She serves on the Board of Supervisors Climate Change Committee and represents Marin County in the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, as well as the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC. She also serves on Marin Housing Authority, the Marin Flood and Water Conservation District, and others. It's amazing she has time to sleep. Ms. Peters served 3 terms on the Mill Valley City Council and as mayor in 2010, 2014, and 2018. Previously, she worked at PG&E in the managing, she worked at PG&E managing environmental regulatory compliance for air, water, and toxic substances and climate change programs. a graduate of Stanford University with a concentration in environmental policy. Ms. Peters and her husband live in Mill Valley and have 2 adult sons. Without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to present Stephanie Moulton-Peters.
Thank you, Scott and Alan and Kevin as well for having me today. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you. I actually was last with you, I think in 2018 as the chair of the Transportation Authority of Marin, on which I still serve as chair, as Scott said. And at that time, 2018, I was also mayor of Mill Valley for the 3rd time. And I'll talk a little bit about how I became mayor for the 3rd time. But I wanted to just take a minute to say, when Kevin Haggerty and I were planning the program today, and we rattled off a list of issues that I could cover. And as I looked at them yesterday with Alan and Scott and Kevin, I went, wow, these are really all hot button issues. How did I sign up to do all this? But these are the hot button issues, and I am here to serve and here to answer your questions and impart some information. They are all a part of the challenging times that Marin County and the rest of the state and the country are facing these issues. And so we're all in it together, and we need to work together to find a way through. You know, when I took the county supervisor seat last January of 2021, we were all in the middle of a huge pandemic that turned everything on its head and required tectonic shifts in how we live, how we do business, how we connect with each other. Today is an example of that, meeting online. And life was pretty well shut down in that January of 2021. And the County of Marin faced a heavy burden of keeping residents safe, keeping local businesses and county services going in unprecedented pandemic. And we've come a long way since that time. And yet, as I'll report shortly, we continue to live with variants of the coronavirus and now the flu and RTV. And so we continue to be in it and need to take precautions. And so I was just getting to the point this fall where I thought a new normal had materialized. And to some extent it has. And we are also just coping with ongoing changes and needing to keep our guard up with regard to COVID. Nonetheless, as I'll report today, the Board of Supervisors is moving forward on a number of initiatives, making progress on some of the intractable problems and challenges that we have, and continuing to go ahead while we address the pandemic. So I just want to say for a moment, we'll be saying goodbye to 2 of our long-term supervisors, Supervisor Judy Arnold of Novato and Supervisor Damon Conley, who is already on the job as our assembly member up at the state capitol now. But they've both been marvelous colleagues to serve with, and I wish them well in their new endeavors. And I also am excited to welcome Supervisor-elect Eric Lucan of Novato, Supervisor Mary Sackett, who is already on the job, having been sworn in by the governor last week, and has joined the board now in our policy making discussions. So we've got a strong team. I look forward to continuing with Supervisor Katie Rice, our board chair, and Supervisor Rodoni. We've got a very good team going into 2023. So today I was asked to not only address the issues of COVID, housing, homelessness, Golden Gate Village, and the sheriff's AB 1185 oversight committee, but also to talk a little bit about myself and how I came to public service and how I approach governing. And so I'll start with that and just spend a little time. I came to public service the way a lot of us do, as a community volunteer. I volunteered in my community when my children were young, doing emergency preparedness work. I live in a very fire-prone part of Mill Valley, and so it was not lost on me that I could help my family and my community by becoming a part of the preparedness committee. I chaired that and actually got that to be a full-time commission, which it still is. And also got involved with safe routes to school. Just kids walking and biking to school seems like a simple thing. I think a lot of us did that growing up, but over time, the kids were becoming more and more shuttled in cars, and that just seemed in our small community-friendly towns like something to work on and change. So I've continued to be involved with those efforts. It was suggested I run for city council at one point. My kids were too little at that point, but later on I did take it on. And in our small cities and towns, we enjoy wonderful local elected officials who essentially are community volunteers on a larger stage, but they're bringing their talents and their time to support our communities and keep them in the well-functioning cities and towns that we enjoy in Mill Valley. And in Mill Valley, there was a tenet of good government, which I think is a marvelous one, so I'm going to repeat it. But the three legs of the stool were collaboration, compromise, and consensus in order to move forward on the issues and challenges we face. And that was something that was indoctrinated in me as a new council member. They were good words to live by and good practices at the Mill Valley Council and many other councils in Marin and the County Board of Supervisors continue to follow. It means that all points of view deserve to be heard, and I believe that strongly, and I listen and I seek out different points of view. I weigh them. And I do the homework and the studies that need to get done to inform an opinion. And then I make a decision with my colleagues that we feel is in the best interest of the community. And sometimes that means giving a little on your own personal position to move to the middle and come to consensus in order to get to a policy decision that enables you to move forward and take action. And that's what's most important to me, is moving through the issues and taking action on them. Very briefly, during my time on the Mill Valley City Council, Miller Avenue was a big project. Some of you may remember that. That was 15 years in the making. It was community driven. It was planned. And then there was some thought, again, rethinking about whether that was the right plan. So we stopped and we restarted, and then moved through a process that got out the other end. That project was completed in 2018, and we actually won 3 statewide awards for the design of that road, which has become a model throughout Marin County for complete streets for all users, cars, bikes, walkers, and transit. So I'm very proud of that one. You know, we got pensions under control as the county and the cities and towns in Marin had to. We lived through a recession, the Great Recession, and drew down our reserves. That's what they're there for, and then built them back up. I've passed 3 renewed parcel taxes and sales taxes for our streets and roads locally and for the Transportation Authority. Mill Valley won a climate change award from the League of California Cities. Under my leadership, we had an award-winning general plan that we passed a few years ago. We joined Age-Friendly Marin and Bike-Friendly America. And frankly, we won so many awards that I had to ask the city manager to please put a bookcase in the council chambers to just show off what the city had accomplished. And we're not unique. Marin cities and towns function on this level, and I'm proud to be part of that. I'm also proud to be part of the Board of Supervisors, and it's not a surprise at all that when I moved from city council member into the board, there was a whole raft of new issues, including health and human services, our criminal justice system, and other issues that are the purview of the county. So it's taken a steep learning curve. I think I've climbed it for the most part, have a grasp on the issues. And I'm moving forward now on the issues in my own district and then across the county. So let's move into COVID now as a starting point. And I bring information from our public health director, Matt Willis, who has done such an admirable job with county staff and staff throughout the cities, keeping our communities safe. What he describes, we are currently experiencing a triple-demic of regulatory viruses: influenza, the flu, respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, and COVID-19. And they are rapidly filling local hospital beds and emergency rooms. Currently, the emergency departments in all 3 county hospitals, Sutter Health and Novato Community Hospital, Kaiser Permanente and San Rafael Medical Center, and Marin Health Medical Center, have been functioning at near maximum capacity. Because regional hospital bed capacity is tight, patients who require hospitalization are spending more time in emergency departments awaiting bed openings. So the rates of all 3, the transmission rates continue to rise in Marin County and across the region with no signs of abating locally. And we know this because we measure, as you may all know, we measure the incidence in local wastewater levels for influenza, RSV, and COVID, which have increased by 26, 33, and 16% respectively. Our common flu, influenza A, the levels in the wastewater are 90 times greater than they were in mid-October. It's flu season, we know that, and this is what we're seeing. COVID rates have increased 37% over the last week. And so that is concerning. And then, so it's time for all of us to return to some of the basic protections that we were all taking earlier in the year. And those include getting vaccinated and boosted and treated. And then if you're sick, of course, stay home and test for COVID. If you're out and about in crowded public indoor places, wear a mask, wash your hands, and cover your mouth and nose when you sneeze. I am going to leave it at that. I can answer other questions, but I do want to turn to the other public health issue momentarily that this county is facing, and that is the fentanyl epidemic. Fentanyl, as many of you know, is a synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. It is a major contributor to drug overdose deaths by suppressing breathing. It is typically manufactured abroad with an unpredictable potency, and it is currently being infused into local recreational drugs, rendering them lethal. And so we're seeing consequences of unintentional and intentional use. Fentanyl has contributed to 57% of fatal overdoses in Marin in 2021. And 78% of these overdoses were in combination with recreational drugs that were taken. Now, the symptoms and the impacts are reversible with Narcan, which is a drug that can be administered on the spot. And is available widely for use. I will just say that the County of Marin is now actively redirecting our outward-facing efforts in the communities away from the opioid crisis that was of the last 2 decades and moving now to fentanyl. We're redirecting our efforts with our young people, who are the ones most vulnerable to obtaining recreational drugs that have been laced with fentanyl and then bearing the consequences, the very sad consequences that we read about. So if I can answer more questions on this later, but I just want to say this is front and center along with COVID for the county public health. I'll move now to another hot button issue, and that is housing and the housing element. Scott shared with me that you had a panel on that earlier this year. So you know that we've been going through a very detailed process here at the county, working on the housing element for the unincorporated area. Similar efforts have been made at the city and town levels. I want to give a shout out to columnist Dick Spotswood for his column today, supporting a focus on affordable and workforce housing which I completely agree with. This is where we have the shortage in Marin County that needs to be addressed. I also want to acknowledge fellow Mill Valleyan Susan Kirsch and her a belief, which I agree with, that we need to get the right RENA numbers in the future and have the right methodology and formula. This was a point of view also espoused by my colleague Pat Eklund on the Novato City Council, who has been a member of AVEG for a very long time. So we need to make legislative fixes going forward. But let's focus where we are right now, which is dealing with the RENA process we have and the housing elements that we do need to get past. The county will bring its final housing element to the Board of Supervisors the last week of January. This past week, we had a workshop on the sites that have been selected throughout the county. And have taken some last input on that. But in addition to the issue of the housing element and coping with an overwhelming and unrealistic set of RENA numbers, which I completely acknowledge, we also have to understand that at play here, as many of you understand, we have these new state mandates through legislation completely apart from the housing element process. And that there are by right approval processes, there are density bonuses that sit outside of the RENA, but coupled with the RENA allocation are really, well, they're off the charts. But here's the thing, we've got to keep our oar in the water. I think those of us who have been going through this process and those of you who have been following it realize that our best defense at this point in time is to use the opportunities to exercise as much control as we can, which is the locations of where to site the housing are up to us. And so we make the best of where we think they should go. And also the design, the qualitative design standards or form-based codes, as we're calling them here at the county. What should the building envelopes look like? If we're going to build housing, what is it that, what density and height, bulk and mass is appropriate for different areas in our jurisdiction. So I think, as I say, those of us who lived through the process realize it's incumbent on us to put the fence around things to the extent that we can and manage the process as best we can while we go forward the coming year with what I hope will be legislative fixes. Two things, including the one-size-fits-all mandate to put housing in universally across our jurisdiction, but the state of California. There are clearly areas in Marin County, high fire zones, as well as very high fire zones, as well as areas subject to future sea level rise and flooding that should just be off the table as locations to build housing. There are problems now, they're going to be greater problems in the future. Those areas should just be eliminated from the area that is used to calculate housing possibility. So again, the Planning Commission here at the county met last night, had a further discussion of the sites and moving forward with the EIR. I do believe it's incumbent on us to get an approved housing element in place so that we've got the as much control as we can. I don't think trying to sue the state is going to do any good at all, quite honestly. And so I would advise against those efforts. I know some people here today are passionate about that. I don't think they're going to bear fruit. And this is again where I think legislative fixes and working with our state legislators is probably the best avenue, as well as passing our housing elements. I'll move now to homelessness, which is of course a function of housing availability here in Marin County. And I think we've known for quite some time that there have been housing is increasingly unaffordable to our workforce and low income populations. And, you know, at one point in time, Marin County had whole communities. I think those of us who have lived in the county a long time remember that our plumbers and electricians and painters and mechanics and school teachers and firemen and firewomen lived here. And that is largely not the case anymore, much less the essential workers in our grocery stores, our hospitals, our childcare facilities. Most of these people are commuting in from outside of the community, so and outside the county. So we are now no longer a full county anymore with everybody here. And so we have become part of the regional Bay Area, where our workforce is commuting in, spending long hours getting to and from their homes. And something has to be done about that. We just cannot expect people who work here to spend a quarter of their lives in the car commuting. So we do need housing. And I would agree again with columnist Spotswood that it is really time for a state and perhaps regional ballot measure to provide funding to subsidize affordable and workforce housing. The market was not going to create this on its own. We know that. It's great that we have the inclusionary zoning, but in the end, we're going to need additional help to create the units that we need. In our homeless picture, the county saw and our city saw the rise of encampments in the last 2 years. It was in confluence with COVID, and rising housing prices resulted in our encampments. Very unfortunate situation. The cities and the counties have been working together to address that, to provide more transitional housing as well as more permanent housing. Here's a few facts and figures about our homeless population. Many of you may know these already. Homeless are largely residents of Marin County. There's some 80% of people who are homeless resided in homes in Marin County before they became homeless. So it is us. And in addition, the county instituted a housing first policy in 2016, which is the first thing that homeless people need is a home. And then we can work with them to provide the support services to help get life back on track, whether that's medical or substance abuse counseling, jobs training, just overall family support. But stabilizing people in homes is the #1 success factor in ameliorating homelessness. So in the last 5 years, the County of Marin has permanently housed 560 people with long histories of homelessness. And 94% of these people are still housed, which is a very impressive track record. And in fact, many counties are calling on Marin to understand how we've accomplished this. We did see a rise in homelessness, as I mentioned, in conjunction with COVID, and we experienced a rise, particularly among families experiencing homelessness. We've seen a major decrease in veteran homelessness by 35% in the last few years, which is a great accomplishment. We have new housing sites coming online. You may have heard of these. We've got Casa Buena, acquired through Project Home Key state funding, now fully renovated in Corte Madera with 18 beds. Jonathan's Place, the revamped Mill Street Center, opened its doors this fall with 40 emergency shelter beds and 32 units of supportive housing. South Alicio will have 43 units of permanent supportive housing opening next year, 2023. And then 3301 Kerner will have 16 new beds for unhoused individuals and approximately 32 beds to house the relocated Carmel program residents in 2024. We do expect a new Home Key round of funding in 2023, and we are hearing from local jurisdictions who are interested in being part of providing additional permanent supportive housing. We are continuing to provide our shelter program. There are always shelter beds available, and those quickly here. I'm going to follow up with the contact for shelter beds that are currently available, and we are opening severe weather shelters, as this week with the extra cold weather, we are making shelter available. And we'll get the links to all that information to the Marin Coalition after this talk. Moving quickly now to Golden Gate Village. So I'm sure everyone, well, many are aware that the Marin Housing Authority Board voted to approve a preferred housing solution to go ahead and renovate the existing buildings at Golden Gate Village using standard tax credit financing that is commonly used to renovate public housing. We worked with the Residents Council for a number of months and to do a feasibility analysis of the deep green building renovations they were advocating for, as well as no new building. So there will be no additional building at Golden Gate Village. Job training is part of this plan. An endowment fund for the residents of Golden Gate Village is also will be a part of this plan. And we'll be working with the Marin Community Foundation to set up an endowment, public-private endowment fund that will be seeded with $2 million from the county and open to anyone in the county who wishes to contribute towards scholarship, towards first-time home buyer mortgage subsidies, and other things that we will work with a advisory committee that will yet to be established that will include the members of the residents and the Residents Council. We're moving forward with a developer qualification effort now, where we will be working again in tandem with members of the residents and Residents Council and professionals in the building and finance industry to develop a request for qualifications for affordable housing home builder developers. And we hope by next June that we will have a partner on board to go forward. The decision the board made last month was not a decision we took lightly at all. We spent quite a bit of time studying and understanding the issues, the financing, and the way to move forward and make this long-awaited renovation happen. We had the benefit of a very knowledgeable consultant provided to us by HUD. Mike Andrews is his name, who does consulting on affordable and public housing all over the country. He worked with us to assess feasibility of Residents Council plan, as well as the Housing Authority plan. You know, in the end, the Housing Authority plan had the capital that we need to fully renovate these buildings. You only get one shot at this. And we wanted to go in with the most robust and reliable source of funding. And the issue also was funds to maintain the building over time. The plan also provides for those. And this will make up for a shortfall that all HUD-owned properties have been in a shortfall, have not had adequate funding across the country. This has been the case. So by moving to working with a developer partner and getting into what they call a Section 18 arrangement, we will have more funds going forward to maintain the buildings over time. We do want to work with the residents carefully to address their desires. We do want them to be part of the decision-making body, and we are taking steps to make that happen. So again, this was not a decision we took lightly, but I think we have a path forward now, and we are going to move ahead as quickly as possible to get this long-awaited renovation to happen. And finally, in regard to the AB 1185 Sheriff's Oversight Committee, this effort, it was directed by the Board of Supervisors. All the board has requested that we go forward with a Sheriff's Oversight Committee. The sheriff is working cooperatively on that. There is a subcommittee that has been put together to assess both the Citizen Oversight Committee and the Inspector General position, which could also serve in this capacity. and will, during the first quarter of next year, come forward with a set of recommendations about how this committee would be comprised, the responsibilities that it would have, and how to go forward with this effort for the Board of Supervisors. That effort currently is being led by the Human Rights Commission and the Office of Equity, with guidance from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, NACOL. And I want to know, they are right now in just releasing a community survey. We'll get the link on that out there. They would like to get community input on a number of aspects of this initiative. And that survey has just been released this past week. I can take other questions on how this would work, but I think at this point we're at probably a time to move to questions. Yeah, we're about 12:35, 12:40. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
I'm back. Thank you for that. We have a couple of links that we're putting up on the screen now that were referenced in your remarks, Supervisor. This is a link, first of all, to Mike Andrews', I guess, a presentation about Golden Gate Village and the feasibility study. So there is the link to that. Below that, we have a link to your office, which you provided us in case folks have some follow-up that they would like to address to you after this program. And Jennifer, who works in your office, has her email on there as well. So if anybody wants to, I know it's probably a lot to write down. If you want to do a screenshot of what we're showing, you can take those down. And if you didn't catch them during the program, we'll have that up on our website when we have the recording of this event posted. So you'll be able to get those there as well. So just that little housekeeping thing. Okay, let me move on to some questions. First of all, we have from Lisa Simons a question about Novato facilities. She asks, is there a warming shelter available in Novato at this point?
Great question. I don't have an answer for you at this moment, but I will get one and make sure we make that available.
Okay. Our next question asks about COVID, and I guess this is a general question as opposed to Marin specific, but well, this is Marin specific. The question says, I've noticed that many of the COVID patients in our local hospitals have been boosted. Are there any explanations for this? Why is it, or what is the current recommended time frame for those who are boosted to be boosted again? Is it now an annual vaccine? I know you're not our public health officer, but in discussing this with Matt, I'm sure you've got some ideas.
Yeah. I'll just say I'm getting my booster this Friday at the Northgate Shopping Center. It's a wonderful place. They're very well organized. It is free of charge. These boosters, like many boosters, have a limited time frame for the greatest potency, and with frequency, it's time to get them updated. Again, COVID is a mutating virus, and it gets better over time at being a virus. That's what they do. So I think the best advice is it's time for another booster if you haven't had one. And that renews your immune system or boosts it. And so I think that's the thing to do as prescribed by our public health officer.
Okay. We have a question that goes a little bit outside of what topics you've already dealt with, but I think it's an interesting question. As it relates to equity, what is your position on reparations?
Yeah. Very good question. Thank you for that. I'm very interested in reparations. I'm following that issue. I learned today that the State Reparations Committee is actually meeting in Oakland, and I had not realized that. If I realized it, I would have tried to go today, but then I couldn't have been here with you. So look, the reparations is a serious issue. I'm glad that our state is the first to look into it, along with the national efforts in Washington, D.C. I think this is something that will be important for us to grapple with over time. I think it's going to take some doing, but I think it's necessary. And I also frankly think it's a part of the conversation about Golden Gate Village that needs to be had, that in the end, for Golden Gate Village, this was about renovating public housing and for the people who need it. And we have some 700 families on the waiting list for public housing. So we do need this, but we also need to address reparations. And I think working with the state level effort is the way to do that.
Okay, we now have a question about supportive housing. What is permanent supportive housing? If one is lucky enough to secure permanent supportive housing, does that mean that they have that housing as long as they qualify or some other period of time? How does permanent supportive housing differ from Section 8 housing? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, because in trying to be efficient going through my notes, I did not go into that. So I'm very glad someone asked this. So here's what we know about many people who've experienced homelessness. There are contributing factors. Sometimes it can be cataclysmic financial strain. Other times there are long-standing chronic health and mental health issues that are the underlying problem. And so unless we attend to these underlying issues, it is really going to be a challenge for someone to turn their life around. So in the supportive housing sites that we have developed, we are bringing in caseworkers, social workers who partner with the individual and understand the support services they need. They'll do an assessment and offer whatever support, again, if it's mental health, if it's just health issues, if it's job training and support that way, if it's education, whatever the individual needs to be successful and get their life back on track. And yes, for as long as this person lives in the permanent supportive housing, they will always have access to this support service. Some people will do well enough. It's a little like hospice. Sometimes you come in with hospice and people really thrive and they go out of hospice and carry on with their lives. This is the case with supportive services. Sometimes a period of time with supportive services, all somebody really needs to transition back into their regular life. So that's an overview, but it is part of what's provided, and those needs are assessed on an ongoing basis. And that is part of the wraparound services that is provided that you don't get with just a Section 8 voucher, housing voucher on its own. But the housing voucher and supportive services can be married together, and we're also doing that in the county. Scott, I'm not hearing you. I think your microphone's not on.
My apologies. Okay, let's ask about a different topic. We've had programs in the past talking about transportation, and I'm not up on the status of this, but the issue of the connection between the 101 freeway and the 580 for the Richmond Bridge traffic. Is there anything more recent that you can report from the county's standpoint? I know it's a Caltrans project for the most part, but obviously
yes,
it integrates with our local authorities as well.
Absolutely. So this has been a long wanted project. I was reminded last week that we started with, I think, 13 to 19 alternatives as to what kind of connector project this could be. And we've gone through a process with community input to boil that down such that I think we have, and forgive me, I haven't looked at the details recently, but we have 5 to 7 alternatives that are currently being studied in more detail. San Rafael, City of San Rafael is an active partner in this, of course, because it goes through their jurisdiction, and in particular the Canal neighborhood. And we're looking at right now a connector that is what I'll call the low-speed connector. So it would take the same path off of the Bellum Avenue exit that is currently existing and would provide a direct connector over Bellum Boulevard so that you wouldn't have to stop at the stop sign down there and get onto a city street. So we're looking at options to do that. We're taking local transportation needs into account, and let me follow up. I know it's in the further design. I'm not sure that we've been in the EIR step next. I believe that comes next, and we'll sort through the potential impacts of the options. I assume that there'll be 3 that go through that process, and we'll come out the other end of that. And construction, I would think, would happen in the next, 5 or so years.
Okay, let's get back to housing again. Obviously, a lot of topics there. ABAG has clearly imposed significantly higher minimum RENA numbers for every jurisdiction in Marin, including the county, as you noted. And every local entity is struggling to identify sites for additional development. It seems some progress has been made, and we've heard from other officials in other entities or localities that talk about specific locations that they've identified. You mentioned the concerns about not only location, but the appearance of projects, the building envelope, as you refer to it. So obviously, this is top of the list for you and the entire board, as well as everyone else in Marin who deals with housing and zoning. How would you assess the current status? Are we making progress? Do you think we'll be in a position to satisfy the state regulations and requirements while also maintaining the quote unquote quality of life that we hope to maintain here in Marin? And then lastly, what type of feedback are you getting from the community? Are folks barraging you with their points of view in a helpful way or an unhelpful way? How is this affecting your job?
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for that. Look, this is a make the best of what you can effort, right? This is tough going. I think we all know that this is very challenging going. Again, as I said in my remarks, and as we did in Mill Valley at my time, it's important to keep your oar in the water and not walk away from these processes. You've got to keep the oar in the water. No one is happy about this process and not the process, but the numbers we're living with. And and I just think we can be honest about that. We looked very carefully at the site areas that we picked throughout the county, and they differ because different areas of the county are different. Southern Marin is much more tightly packed. That and the Ross Valley are the tightly packed areas with more spacious development patterns elsewhere in the county. And then, of course, the rural areas in West Marin, which we are committed to keeping rural, agricultural, and parkland. So the 101 corridor for the county of Marin has for decades been our preferred area for locating housing, and it continues. And that was the theory that we worked with. We know traffic is an issue; it always is. Traffic impacts have somewhat been taken off the table by the state vehicle miles traveled analysis. For those of you that are wonky and into that, you know that VMTs have replaced LOS, level of service, at our intersections. It doesn't mean we can't consider congestion at our intersections. It just means that that isn't the criteria in the EIR that's used anymore. So it really is number of trips. And where does that take us? That takes us to looking more carefully at the trips we take and how we take them. And are there trips that can be shifted off peak? Are there trips that can be shifted onto transit, commuting to work? We've had a sea change in our whole work at home effort, and I don't see that changing, quite frankly. And then for those who are hale and hearty and our kids, can we continue with our safe routes infrastructure programs to make it safe for kids to walk and bike to school and get there on their own steam? So that's an aside on coping with the traffic and congestion. Back to the housing. There will be some sites that will lend themselves more readily to development. And I think that's what this process has also brought forward. There are sites that have been on the radar screen throughout the county as logical development sites. And I think those are the ones that we'll see developed first. Other sites in our inventory were, let's just say, not quite in that first group. And so we'll just see. In the end, these sites have to work economically for developers. They have to work for the community. We will continue to have community input processes. And we will use, as I said, the safeguards that we have, the site selection and the design standards. And I want to just say a little about design standards. If people in the audience today have not taken an opportunity to familiarize yourselves with what they call objective design standards, I urge you to do that. This is, again, an effort mandated by the state to streamline our project approval processes by coming up with sort of categories of development and standards that would get approved in our communities. And so what this means is that communities can set up standards based on the density and the zoning and the design standards to try and give a building envelope, a height, bulk, and mass, and what is it that buildings should look like. We did this for Miller Avenue a few years ago when I was still on the council, where we came up with a plan to describe the kind of development we expect will happen on Miller and planned for when we renovated that road, such that there would be 3 levels of multifamily housing in the parcels large enough to take it. Anything above 3 stories would be stepped back a little farther away so that these properties wouldn't look so massive. The county's objective design standards offer several different types or typologies, as they call them, of small, medium, and larger size building envelopes. And you will find, as you look at them, that these design typologies really mirror the kind of development pattern we already have in Marin County. In many of our old downtown cores, we had small duplexes and small apartment buildings. They were walkable to the train stations that were the foundation of Marin County development in the last century. So we've got little courtyard apartments where small homes are around courtyards. We've got small duplexes that look like single family homes. We have small apartment buildings that fit in. So these are the kinds of development patterns that are reflected in these design guidelines that will shape going forward what development can look like. Again, the county has to pay special county communities need to stay involved in the process, but these are some of the tools we have to put in place to manage the housing that we've been asked to plan for.
Okay, let me shift gears a little bit. Well, first, before I do, there's a question about your position on the bike lane for the Richmond-Senfeld Bridge, which I guess is a transit issue. So I'll let you talk about that, and then
I was going to be surprised if that didn't come up, and I think it's folks who know me know that I am a bicycle enthusiast. I actually bought an electric bike 5 years ago to see what the commute to County Civic Center here would be. That's a 10-11 mile commute. We are building out the North-South Greenway, the old rail line that starts in Sausalito and runs north through Novato, as well as on-street facilities through our neighboring cities. And that north-south greenway, as an example, is not built out enough yet, where I see it's ready for most people. We've got to get the last linkages. But I do think electric bikes are a game changer in making it possible. I tell people when I got on the bike, I felt like I was back in my 20s. It's great to have a little extra booster power. And after I got the bike, somebody said, geez, we need a fire hydrant at the top of Fern Canyon Road in Mill Valley. And I thought, I'll be right over. I'm going to go right up that hill and just go take a look. And you can do that with electric bikes. So having said that, let's talk about the bike lane over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. Anyone who's been following the bridge and the ridership most recently reported this past month in the IJ knows that most of the ridership is on the weekends. It's recreational ridership, which is what I would expect. And for the hale and hearty that go over during commute, that's great. The numbers are not large and we're not seeing them increase over time. So so that's that. And then let me say, there are many factors that contribute to the backup on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge as you approach the toll plaza coming from the east, which again, this is people working in Marin County coming from more affordable housing in the East Bay. So we have to remember we contribute to that problem with our lack of housing. Things that also contribute to that backup include the delay of going through the toll plaza, and those who take that route know that we've gone all electronic tolling there, and there is a plan to remove those toll booths in the next few years and reconfigure that whole approach so that it flows better than it currently does now. In addition to that, MTC has a Richmond Bridge Forward program. This is an effort that the Regional Transportation Agency is using on all of their bridges, where they are looking at other things that will reduce congestion, including getting a diamond lane or a high occupancy vehicle lane, which will allow buses coming from the East Bay to have what they call a travel time advantage. Right now, if you're a bus coming from the Richmond East Bay area, you sit in traffic just like everybody else. So one of the strategies that will be employed in the next couple of years is to make one of the lanes an HOV lane in the morning. For buses and carpools. And then finally, impacts on the Marin County end, which are also being studied by the Transportation Authority and are of great interest to the city of Larkspur and the city of San Rafael, are the impacts of unleashing a third car lane. If we were to take the bike lane away and change it into an auto lane, what would the impact be on the other side on Marin County? And what we know is that it would overwhelm our local streets right now. We are not prepared to accept the level of cars that will come in when a third lane is open. They will cause bottlenecks elsewhere in Marin County. That has to get dealt with. There's a price tag that goes along with that, and the Transportation of Marin is studying that right now in conjunction with San Rafael. And so all of these things need to be weighed in any decision that we make about the bike lane and a third auto lane and all of that. And, you know, I'm confident we can figure it out. I'm also confident it's going to take us a while to work through all the factors I've just talked about and put in place solutions that will make traffic flow better going forward.
We have some questions coming in. Let me try and get them all in. Here's a question about fire issues. Can the county and San Rafael work better cooperatively regarding fire safe regulations and rules, especially at the boundaries between city and county?
Okay, well, I love talking about fire safety, and I'm very proud of the efforts our county is making. Of course, I have the most experience in Southern Marin and I'm less familiar with the San Rafael situation, but let me share this. When voters approved the ballot issue, Measure C, to create the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. That was a groundbreaking moment. The fact that all of us in the county overwhelmingly realize that if we want fire safety, we're going to have to make more investments in accomplishing that. And that authority, in conjunction with our local fire departments, is now able to move the needle on vegetation management, evacuation planning, and other emergency planning in a way we never could have done before. So that's a good thing. In terms of the interface between the county and the cities, of course, there is always room for improvement. I think the Wildfire Prevention Authority is providing the umbrella that makes some of these interface issues more workable, gives a platform to work these things out. I know that it also provides a platform for best practices throughout the county. We can all learn from each other, we do. And so I would expect if there are issues currently in the San Rafael interface between the county and the city, and oh, by the way, let's throw in county parks and open space, because they are another player in all this with wide tracts of land, and as well as the water district. So there are many, many players in here that are all working to get on the same page. It'll take a little time, but I think we'll get there. I know the desire is there.
And I'm familiar with the fire break project that's been going on over the last few months. Do you see that as a big win? It seems to be from.
I do, Scott. I'm so excited about these fire breaks, and I want to say they can be done sensitively to take habitat into account. And I really want people to know that the fire agencies are very clear. This is not clear cutting. This is selective removal of low ground cover and limbing up of trees to reduce the incident of a fire climbing from either on the ground into the crown of the trees or vice versa. So yes, these field breaks are so important because they provide a line of demarcation that allows our fire safety personnel to stage themselves in areas to fend off fires spreading from one valley or area to another. So they give our fire service the space and breathing room to marshal resources to keep wildfires from spreading. And that's the value they have. And they can be done in a sensitive way that's responsive to the environment.
Your tax dollars at work.
That's right.
So we have a question from Lenny Hoffman. How do we judge the effort and cost of the process to help resolve our need for assisting our community needs? Something has to be done to help housing, but there must be tremendous pressure to prove the value of the changes made and the cost involved. I guess he's asking about, maybe the political balance there between the two sides of that issue.
Well, Scott, help me understand this. Is this about providing services for homeless? Is that the issue, or what do you see there? I'm not quite clear on it.
Well, I think maybe that's what he's asking about, is the homeless programs and the need to increase or provide housing as opposed to the cost, I guess, is what.
Sure. And that's a good question. And I think any thoughtful person would ask that. I know I have. And so what I will do just on a high level is point to data that exists. And I'm sure you've all seen it, but that compares, the cost of service for healthcare for homeless in an emergency room situation, as opposed to the cost of healthcare provided to homeless and others in a non-emergency room situation. And so, and certainly there is a cost to our public safety, both our fire, paramedics, our police officers. These are our high cost providers for public safety and mental health services. This is not the preferred way to deliver services through these agencies. And so I think what we have found, and again, I'd be happy to look into this further and get back to the questioner, but I think we find that actually providing these services on an ongoing basis to people who need them is actually a more cost-effective way to address their issues from a public tax dollars point of view than what we're currently doing right now. So these investments, I think, pay dividends over time.
Fair enough. Question here about local design standards. I read that the county is talking about eliminating local design standard groups and local plans, such as the Tam Valley Community Plan and the Tam Valley Design Review Board.
Yeah.
Please discuss.
Yeah, I've been in conversation with our county planning deputy director on this very point. Of course, Tam Valley is in my jurisdiction. All jurisdictions who are not in incorporated areas tend to have design review boards appointed by the county supervisor to address their design issues, much in the way that a city planning commission would do for the incorporated cities. So Tam Valley has a design review board, Strawberry has a design review board. There's others throughout the county in the unincorporated areas. And these groups of volunteer residents come together to review design plans for single family homes and commercial and multifamily, the whole gamut. And what they use as their backbone is what Scott has referred to with the question or the community plans. These are smaller versions, but they serve the same purpose as a general plan that cities have. How do we want our city to be designed and to function? The community plans they take effort to maintain, and the community and the county and trying to prioritize where to spend its resources had put community plans, on the back burner for a while as a lower priority. What I was discussing with our deputy planning director is that in light of the state changes and by right and mandates, that certain communities may do well to have a review of their community plans in particular areas that are impacted by the changes in legislation and the increased arena numbers and sites. So I do think the whole issue needs a closer look. We will have to determine how and when we can commit the resources to update them. So I think there are conversations based on input, including at the Planning Commission Monday night, that are encouraging us to take another look at these community plans and how best to utilize them and update them where it's needed.
Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple more questions before we wrap up. Forgive me for staying on housing, but I'm curious if you've got any thoughts about SB 9 and 10, which are the state rules at the Sacramento level that have essentially nullified single-family zoning at the local level and opened up any parcel to subdivision and multiple development, which Susan Kirsch and others are trying to draw attention to. So just wondered if you had any comments about that.
Sure, I'll just say briefly that I feel these two bills are, again, areas that probably could use some additional work through additional legislation. I think, again, there was more of a one size fits all. And again, I do think local factors on the ground, hazard levels. So anyway, I've not looked at these two bills closely recently. So I need to do that. But the last time I did look at them and talked with Susan, I felt that we needed to take another pass at our legislators with these.
Okay, we'll stay tuned. And then lastly, let me ask about Measure M in the Tiburon Peninsula, which was the measure that allocates quite a bit of taxpayer dollars for essentially holding in a non-developed manner the 110-acre parcel that's along the water there above the town of Tiburon. Any thoughts on that? Obviously, the voters went for it, and as a tax measure, it had to pass by over 2/3. So it got quite a bit of support, and it seems like people are willing to put their money where their mouth is to preserve that as open space.
Yeah, great question, and it certainly has come up at the Board of Supervisors meetings more than once about this property. First, of course, let's say this property, there are many who worked many decades to bring this into open space. And this Measure M was another step towards the acquisition that has been long wanted. The property as it was zoned was for large single-family homes. You can imagine with the views those properties would command, these would be very high-end homes. So in terms of contribution to the housing shortage that we have, this property would not have been that, would not have contributed that. And so, from an access point, you know, the idea of zoning a lot of rezoning and putting a lot of affordable housing up there, access is not great as it is in a lot of parts of Marin County. And so again, I think that effort to acquire it as open space was long in coming. I'm glad that we saw it through and that it's happening. And I do think for housing purposes, we need to focus our efforts on the 101 corridor. Within 2 miles of 101 is what is in our county general plan, has also been there for years, that this was the area that we wanted to expand housing in. I think that's the right place to put housing.
Very good. Stephanie Moulton-Peters, I want to thank you on behalf of the Marin Coalition for joining us again, as you have reminded me. Short-term memory, sorry, what can I say? It's been a pleasure hearing your views on things. I think the audience learned a lot. We're going to put up on the website those contact points where our audience can reach your office if they have further questions they'd like to ask about or give you input from their point of view. So let me thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and educating us today. I want to thank also our webmaster, Alan Shavitz, for another flawless program, and our chair, Kevin Haggerty, for putting this program together. We'll look for you all in February. We don't know the date of the program yet. We'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, happy holidays, everyone. Have a great new year. And Supervisor, thank you for a very edifying afternoon. Really
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see all of you soon, I hope. Take care. Bye-bye.